Hey everyone, Robyn Openshaw here. I've been 18 years online as the Green Smoothie Girl, but I've also been teaching for 5 years about Bitcoin, and I want to make it super simple for you. One of my biggest frustrations when I went out there to start learning about it is that I was slogging through a bunch of YouTubers, crypto bros, people who had never been through a recession, people who had never lost their shirt. And I was a whole generation older than them. And I was looking for where's the path for me to learn about this? Well, let's start with, because I'm going to keep this as jargon free as possible, because that was another one of my frustrations is all this jargon that I didn't know. Why have I gone so all in on Bitcoin? It's not my entire net worth. I still have exposure to real estate. I still have three rental properties. I'm still in the markets, but the vast majority of my net worth is in Bitcoin. How did I slowly, over the course of 5 years, become so confident in this asset? Well, let's start with the problems with the other assets. The stock market is the most inflated that it's been in ever. So we've basically been in a 41-year bull run, which means the stock market has just run up, up, and up. And so this is a little bit of jargon. Price to earnings ratios make absolutely no sense logically. Now, could it continue to run up? I think all of us have quit betting against that because it's almost like the Federal Reserve must have tools to keep the rich richer and keep the stock market from crashing. I don't know, but I don't want to invest in a company that has no assets backing them, but just keeps going up in value at like 100 times earnings, where the price I'm paying for the stock isn't justified by the earnings. Then you've got bonds where some of the world's billionaires have said, I don't care what bond you're in, a corporate bond, a municipal bond, a short-term federal T-bill, a long-term government bond, 2-year, 5-year, 20-year, you're losing money versus inflation. So that's kind of how I see the stock market. That's kind of how I see the bond market. And most people historically have been in a 60-40 portfolio, 60% equities or stocks, 40% bonds. So my retirement off-ramp was real estate. Well, how's real estate looking these days? First of all, it ran up. Everybody felt rich. Wow, my house is worth a lot of money. Then it slowly started dawning on people, who's going to be able to buy our houses at these prices? It's not like paychecks were growing to meet the price of real estate. Now here in Florida, our real estate market is just sideways and we aren't seeing the buyers, and we're seeing more and more and more people listing. The short-term rentals are in trouble. The people who owned 3 and 4 houses, they're in trouble and they're listing. So real estate has gotten really crazy because of squatters laws that protect squatters who aren't even paying you rent. Our cost of maintenance has gone way up with the cost of living. There's the fact that insurance has gone up, not just here in Florida, where we also have to buy flood insurance that's gone through the roof, but insurance nationwide. I hear people in Iowa that insurance companies are pulling out of Iowa. It's not just here in Florida. And then, of course, the taxes. When your house runs up in value to 200% what it was, your taxes match it. So that's just a quick overview of, well, here's what our alternatives are. These are the things that we've always invested in that we think of as a way for we middle class people to get ahead. Then there's why Bitcoin, because the answer to it isn't just, well, Bitcoin's better than all these others. It's much, much more exciting than that. Bitcoin is a truly scarce asset. To mine Bitcoin, and I'm going to be grossly oversimplified here, you can invest in sort of think of it as like a bank of computers, and they are Bitcoin miners. There are some companies that have a whole warehouse full of computers that are mining for Bitcoin, and they do it block by block. And once they've actually mined a Bitcoin, currently, while I'm speaking to you, one Bitcoin is worth $105,000. So it's gotten really lucrative for Bitcoin miners. And what's really exciting is that there's no company that controls Bitcoin. There's no company called Bitcoin. It is truly decentralized. These Bitcoin mining rigs are all over the world. They're in China. The US has more of them than any other country. They're in South America and Central America. They're all over Asia. They're in Russia. And no government can ban it. Recently, Vladimir Putin in Russia said there's no government that can ban Bitcoin. You'd have to have all the governments in the world working together and take down the internet. And even when you brought the internet back up, which of course they're going to bring the internet back up, that's how they get money out of us. Everything's done via the internet. So slowly the narrative that the governments will shut it down or that it can be shut down, or hey, what about an electrical grid outage? Answer to that's really easy. You have a lot bigger problems than being unable to use your Bitcoin if there's an electrical grid outage. Remember, the elites need the electrical grid too to support absolutely everything that they do. So Bitcoin is a scarce asset. There's 21 million of them. Lots of them have been lost. Michael Saylor, who's probably America's biggest investor in Bitcoin, says that dying without handing off your Bitcoin is the greatest act that you can do for humanity, because the scarcity of Bitcoin is what makes it so desirable. So the scarcity, we really just can't even talk about that enough, because that's the problem with every fiat currency in history. Okay, fiat currencies are like the dollar or the yen or the ruble. So our countries, when they get in trouble, just start printing dollars. And the more dollars they print, the less the dollars you have are worth. And so with Bitcoin, nobody can do that. There's no company that can print more of them. There's no country that can ban it. You can watch the history of China and see that the Chinese government has tried to ban Bitcoin, and then they see the blowback of it, the fact that people just go underground with it, and or they leave China and take what is basically revenue to other countries. And so it's now legal in China. As of 2024, there was a court ruling in China that it's legal for the Chinese citizens to own Bitcoin. You just saw an incoming new presidential administration where every single member of it is pro-Bitcoin. Donald Trump is. He wasn't in 2020. He didn't understand it, which is pretty common for people in their 70s. They don't understand it. They're already rich. They don't think they need to understand it. Warren Buffett doesn't understand it. As far as we know, he hasn't invested in it. He knows economic hard times are coming. And when economic hard times are coming, where do you want to be? You want to be in scarce, rare, valuable assets. So you could make the argument, well, I'd rather be in gold and silver. Well, maybe you've heard my recent story about gold and silver, but after 20 years of buying it when I could, I got my gold and silver valuated. I still kept some silver. I'm not against gold and silver. We've definitely taught in our mastermind and had commodities experts come on and teach us why gold and silver, but we had to make 7 phone calls, and finally I found somebody to buy my gold that was an hour and a half away. It took hours to count it. It then had to be wired. And so your gold and silver are as good as the depth of the bank account of whoever is a gold and silver dealer near you. So I kind of learned that the hard way. And you don't hear people talking about this because the people you know have been buying gold and silver for years, and they've just been stashing it, and they've never actually gone out and used it or needed to sell it or wanting to exchange it into another currency. It took me a few weeks, I would say 4 weeks, to find somebody to buy my gold and silver, to go in, have it counted, get compensated for it, which I didn't get compensated spot price. So whatever you think the spot price is, good luck actually getting that. So it's wired to my bank. Then I have to go through all the rigmarole with the bank, wiring it to a Bitcoin custodian. And so it literally took me almost 4 weeks, even though I have a full-time assistant and lots of help and a bookkeeper. It still took me 4 weeks. So highly recommend you get yourself set up, even if you're just considering buying Bitcoin. I think it takes 200 hours to understand Bitcoin well enough to be confident and comfortable. You need to get your questions answered. We specialize in helping beginners because the more I dug into content about Bitcoin, the more I realized not many people are going to sit there and Google every word they hear that they don't understand. And they're going to slog through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content trying to get to a functional knowledge of Bitcoin, like I did in March of 2020. I was super, super motivated. I saw my assets, my net worth is being seriously in jeopardy when the money printer turned on and it looked like there would just be no end to the money printing. I believe Donald Trump's going to crank up the money printer. He's not going to let Americans become homeless and broke. America is already on the verge of homeless and broke and deep in credit card debt. I think he's going to crank up the money printer and it's just going to go through the roof how much we dilute the value of the US dollar. So what's the alternative? You have Bitcoin over here that's just going up, up, up in value because it's not stable in the sense that there's no volatility. You could argue that the volatility is a good thing. Some people like to trade the volatility because it goes up and then it comes down and it goes up and it comes down. But if you look at the last 15 years and flatten out the ups and downs, it's gone straight up. So Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, 2 years ago was calling Bitcoin a pet rock. Now he's in the game of offering a Bitcoin ETF. He just said at the World Economic Forum that his company met with a sovereign wealth fund. Okay, that means the holdings of a country. And he said that they were deciding whether to go in on Bitcoin 2% of their total assets or 5%. So he said, if we've got countries coming in and investing somewhere between 2 and 5% of their assets, we're looking at before long a $500,000 to $700,000 Bitcoin. Now, the guys that I heard doing commentary on it who've been in Bitcoin for years and know a lot more about Bitcoin than Larry Fink probably does, said, add a zero, Larry, add a zero. So I think that the thesis just keeps getting bigger for Bitcoin. When I started investing in it in March of 2020, it was to pull my money out of banks and dollars. I'd had so many bad experiences with banks. In March of 2020, I went into a Wells Fargo branch where I had over $1 million in the bank and asked for $50,000 in cash, and they didn't have it. They didn't have it. I spent 2 days running around to different Wells Fargo branches all over the greater Salt Lake City area. I lived in Park City, but nobody could give me $50,000. Entire bank branches that didn't have $50,000. So just remember, when your money's in the bank, the business model of banks is fractional reserve lending. You put your money in there, but your cash doesn't stay in there. They deploy it and they make money on the spread. They make money on investing your money in other things. So bonds, stocks, they could be upside down. They could be illiquid. They could get margin called. They could collapse. Banks have collapsed all over the world. Sure, the American government has stepped in and bailed out insolvent banks. They've done it in the last few years. However, the FDIC funds are really low right now. And they come from us in the end. That's who pays for FDIC insurance is you and me. And you only have about $250,000 coverage at any given bank. So, Silicon Valley Bank, there were people with millions of dollars in that bank. And I think on a Friday, they said, sorry, you're screwed if you had more than $250,000 in there. And then on Monday, they changed their minds and they bailed everybody out. That's not going to work for lots and lots and lots of banks going under. But for me, that's not whatsoever the strongest argument for Bitcoin. The dollar doesn't have to fail for Bitcoin to be an amazing idea. Remember, it's decentralized. It is governed by thousands of node operators all over the world. Nothing's going to change about Bitcoin unless over 50% of the node operators make it so. And they can't make it be more than 21 million. That is baked in the cake. So that has been your flyby Bitcoin for Dummies. I've got lots more to say, but I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to really be talking to Gen X because we're the ones who are now tending to our parents who are dying. Our parents aren't going to get it. My parents are a silent generation. They're not even boomers. They're in their 80s. And I actually tried to have a conversation with them about Bitcoin, and I got a blank stare. And when I hung up the phone, my husband said to me, "How'd you think that was going to go?" And I said, about like that. But I had to try. I didn't want it on my conscience that I never talked to them about how they could be growing their wealth, the wealth that they scrimped and saved their whole lives. My parents were never wealthy, but they've both inherited some money. They could make it legacy wealth. I had to bring it up. I wasn't going to let one of my parents go to the grave, and one of my parents has stage 4 cancer without at least trying to explain it to them. But at the same time that we have seniors as parents who might be experiencing cognitive decline and physical decline, and we're having to navigate their end of days and their wishes and what happens to their wealth, some of which some of us will come into their wealth. We're also dealing with our children who, I'm not talking about your child or my child. This isn't some confessional, but our children are discouraged, to put it mildly. We're dealing with millennials and Zoomers who don't see the point, who don't see how to get ahead. And learning about Bitcoin is a wonderful, bright spot for them. So I'm going to be talking to you, Gen X. I know we're the smallest generation in history. I'm one of the older Gen Xers. I'm about to turn 58. If you're 60 or older here in 2025, you're a boomer. You're one of the youngest boomers. But I'm talking to Gen X because I feel like Gen X is starting to come into Bitcoin, but it solves a lot of problems for us. I'm using Bitcoin to solve a major problem in my family, and I will save that as a topic for another day. But I'm going to keep these videos short. Most of the Bitcoin content out there is like 2-hour interviews and hour-long interviews where you're going to hear like 40 words that you don't know the meaning of. So I'm going to try to bring it down to an accessible level. So please click subscribe. This is a brand new channel, but I want to do something different that nobody else is doing out there in the Bitcoin world. So also in the notes down below, you can see how to join our mastermind, where you get 90 minutes with me and often another coach every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. And it gives you a link to get a free month and also an extra $50 off if you use a coupon code that is my first name, Robyn, R-O-B-Y-N. Okay, I hope that helped you understand Bitcoin a little bit better. Let's learn more about decentralization, because it's a very big deal when your money isn't tied to one institution where there's a single point of failure. And that to me is what's so exciting about Bitcoin, is its decentralization. Okay, that's the opposite of having your money at Wells Fargo or JP Morgan Chase or PNC or whatever you have. I've been canceled by 3 banks. Okay, and tons and tons and tons of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs have been canceled by banks in the last several years. Bitcoin can't cancel you. It's censorship resistant. So I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you want to learn more. I'm going to give it to you in bite-sized chunks, and I'll see you next time.